Here is how a top CMO manages their day-to-day life to maximize the output of the business. So if you're not familiar with me, my name's Damon. I'm a fractional CMO. I've managed as many as 5 marketing teams at one point in time, all at the same time, that have generated over $1.5 million a month in revenue. So I've gone back and forth a lot on how to structure my day, what are the biggest needle movers, what can I do as a CMO to really make sure the business is in the best place possible. So after going through a bunch of different iterations, this is the schedule that I like to stick for. I'm going to break it down in this video so you can see the whole thing. So first thing I do right away when I wake up in the morning, and I'm a morning person, I wake up at 5 a.m. most days, is I like to target the biggest needle mover in the company. So that's number one. When I say biggest needle mover, I think of things that basically can just transform the business. Like what are the biggest problems? I think a good leader in any company kind of runs towards the pain, they run towards the problem. I'd like to make sure that whatever the biggest problems are in the company, that I am prioritizing that above all else. Because a lot of times these fixing big problems inside a company can have like massive effects. Something a lot of people don't realize if they've never run a company at scale. If you run a company that makes like $1.5 million a month, chances are you have a couple of big bottlenecks within that company that if you just fix those things, you could add hundreds of thousands of dollars per month, if not millions of dollars per month in profit to the business just by like moving towards the pain, dealing with the hard shit that no one wants to deal with. That's what I do first thing every single morning. I like to keep tabs on like what those biggest issues are and focus on those. So like for example, this year, hands down, biggest needle mover inside our company was show rate. So I like to make sure first thing in the morning, I'm thinking about show rate. I review what was the show rate yesterday? What is the trend of the show rate over the last 30 days, 60 days, 90 days? What have we done to improve show rate? What can I do today to improve show rate? Who do I need to speak to on the team that is fucking up and needs to be fired or needs to be reframed and done, like do their process differently? That's where I start first thing every single morning. So if you don't already do this, by the way, make a list of like the biggest issues in your company, figure out what those are, diagnose like the biggest bottlenecks, biggest constraints, and just have self-awareness around what those issues are, because you should always be looking to fix them. It's, business owners are human. We make mistakes. We procrastinate just like everyone else, but you need to have a sense of awareness over those things, because if you don't, really gonna hold you back. So that's where I start every single morning. Wake up, target the biggest needle mover, approach it head on, attack it, make it my bitch, and try to fix it. So second, increase leverage. Now, this is very specific to me as a CMO, as a marketer. Marketing is inherently a very high leverage aspect of the company. If you look at marketing teams, a good marketing team is pretty lean, in my opinion. Like for me, I have myself, I'm the CMO. I usually have a media buyer. I have a junior copywriter. I didn't have a creative director this year, but like having, I'm looking to bring on a creative director. If you are a good creative director, by the way, definitely feel free to drop me an email. Would love to chat. Videographer, usually that can be a contractor in that case. And that's pretty much it. You don't need tons and tons of people. I'd say like a solid marketing team at max needs like 5-6 people, realistically. Whereas looking at like a sales team, for example, you are pretty big. I've worked on sales teams with as many as 60 people. The operational complexity that comes with that is very, very high. Whereas marketing teams are very leveraged. So I look at ways that I can increase leverage inside the business. So how can I make more money in a way for the company in a way that isn't directly tied to my time? For example, how do I increase leverage nowadays? Posting content. I'm posting content right now. What else am I doing? It's 8 a.m. I am focusing on posting content, because if I had, say, 100,000 YouTube followers that were all established business owners, then I can get them funneled into my email list. I can send an email with an offer. And since I have 100,000 subscribers who are all high intent, high quality people, as opposed to like, 100, 130 or whatever I have now, like I'm able to make more money in a way that's not tied to my time. So posting content, that's a great example of increasing leverage. Increasing, ramping ad spend, improving quality of ads, hiring, hiring the right people for something. I don't spend a ton of time on hiring because I do like to keep the team pretty lean, but I am always like evaluating copywriters, evaluating media buyers, evaluating videographers. Like, how can I get the right people in that are able to save me time so that I can focus more of my time on this? The whole point of increasing leverage, I want as much leverage in the business as possible so that my time is freed up. Then ultimately, I can focus on this. My ideal long-term goal, you have a junior copywriter, you have a junior media buyer, they're writing the ads, they're managing the ads, they are doing all of this. Whereas the CMO, me in this case, I'm just focusing on how do I fix the hard problems? How do I deal with team culture issues? How do I fix show rate? How do we launch a new offer, for example, because our offer is declining? So that is second. Increase leverage. Third, write ads. I would say this is an extension of increasing leverage, but I think as a CMO, you need to always be sharpening your sword. I'd say ads are one of the most important elements of the entire business. And it's one of those things, like, it should be a never-ending work in progress. Especially for me, I was spending as much as $14,000 a day on ads this year. They need to be really good, and there needs to be a lot of creative testing output. So continuously writing ads, making that a habit to do that every single day. I try to do that as well. I've found when I've taken my foot off the gas with writing ads, a lot of times the business has declined. So you need to keep that as a focus. I'm not saying you have to do this every single day. I'm just saying this is what I do, and it's worked very well for me. And I think it can probably work very well for you if you're a CMO or if you're a business owner too. A lot of business owners don't have time to write a bunch of ads every single day, but that's also why they come and bring in someone like me that can just do it for them. So writing ads every day, very important. Next, I move on to doing the actual work. So people talk about this a lot, but as business owners, you have your work on the business and you have your work in the business. You're working on the business at a high level. You're hiring the right people, for example. But then you have your work like within the business. So that's really what I'm referring to here. As a CMO, a lot of times I'm working on new VSLs, for example. If we can improve the VSL, if we can improve the MQL percentage from that VSL, if we can improve the landing page conversion rate, if we can make adjustments to the VSL that improve the show rate, that create higher intent leads, that filter out lower quality leads. There's a million different ways I can do this, but that's a lot of like the doing the work in this case. Or finding issues, like, for example, if I am working on the biggest needle movers, a lot of times I'll take that and then I'm doing the work at this point. Like, if I'm looking at some basic needle movers, something I started doing recently was hammering people with emails post call booking. They book a call, it's 9 a.m. on Tuesday, October 14th. They booked a call for tomorrow afternoon at 2 p.m. Eastern. I went through and wrote up like 10 value-driven emails, threw them in an autoresponder, and then just like let it run. See how it goes. I targeted that as a potential needle mover on show rate. Now, during this period when I'm doing the actual work, I am going through and writing the emails. One thing I forgot to include in here, in using tech. For example, how can I create AI bots that write really good ad hooks, or write the full ad for me, or even make the ad with AI? It's like get a AI avatar through HeyGen and Synthesia or something, and then just make the ads. That's another point of leverage. But here, doing the actual work, you want to minimize this time. I think as a CMO, you want to be doing as little of the like actual work as possible while maximizing your time working on the business. If you're doing tons of like actual work as a CMO, I think that means you have an issue with delegation, realistically. Like, also, when I say CMO, I'm not talking about like or your company makes like 50 grand a month or something, and you're a jack of all trades who does everything. I'm referring to more like established businesses. You have a team, you have people you can delegate shit to, basically. So if you're doing a ton of the actual work, you should probably work on your delegation skills, because like that's not really the biggest needle movers here. This does have to get done. It's like there's no way of not doing any actual work, but you want to maximize time spent on the business rather than in the business. So next, metrics review. All right, the sexiest part of the fucking day, looking at numbers. I look at numbers every day. There is not a day when I don't look at the numbers. And if you are not looking at the numbers, you're fucking up. There's no other way to put it. When you're spending a ton of money on ads, if you don't have like good tracking in place, if you aren't responsible for every single metric inside of every company, every offer you run, like you're fucking up. There's no other way to put it. So I'll go through. I'm not going to share like all the proprietary stuff, how we do our metrics tracking on here, because this is public, but I'll basically go through and track every single metric. Like, what's our cost per lead? What's our cost per qualified lead? What is our cost per booked call? What's our cost per total qualified opportunity? What is our ROAS? What's our CPA? What's our show rate? What's our show rate by closer? What's our close rate? And then I'll go into every single individual campaign. For spending, say, $10,000 a day, I might have like 20 different campaigns running at about $500 a day, and then I'll be tracking each of those campaigns. So like, all right, let's look at yesterday. How many on campaign number 1? How many calls did we book? How many leads did we bring in? What percentage of those leads were qualified leads versus non-qualified leads? What was our qualified lead to booking ratio? How many sets did we get out of that campaign? How many total qualified opportunities were generated by that campaign? Now, I mainly run call funnels, so a lot of times we basically never see like a 1-day ROAS, because our sales cycle is like 21 plus days. But I look at all those metrics there. I look at that on like a 1-day, 2-day, 4-day, 7-day, 14-day, 30-day time frame, lifetime time frame. And then I'll make decisions about like cutting the campaign, scaling the campaign. Usually that's more on a 7-day time frame. But, I'll look at the ROAS, I'll look at the CPA, and then I'll decide like, all right, what do I want to do with this? Do I want to scale it? Do I want to cut it? Do I want to just let it keep running? Sometimes I'll take a solid campaign and I'll make variations of it. Like I'll take a campaign that I think is doing really well and I'll add a new hook on the front of it. Or I will take like a VSL and run it as an ad. There's a million different fucking ways we can do this, but my whole point here is you need to review your metrics. If you aren't reviewing your metrics every goddamn day as a CMO, like or if your CMO is not doing that, you should fire them, because like if you're running, you are responsible for the biggest expense in the entire company, which is ad spend. And if you aren't like on top of it, then I don't really know how else to put it. But review the metrics, review them every single day. You should know it like the back of your hand. And if you're not doing that, that probably is you messing up. But next, leadership stuff. So typically speaking, now this depends. If I'm doing like a fractional CMO deal, it's very different. But I think if you're like one of the owners of the company, you should probably be meeting with your leadership team daily, or at least like 3 times a week. Just discuss the company at a high level, what's going on. Basically take like this. This time for me is like my individual time to work on this. But then we're going to take, and I want my whole leadership team doing this, by the way, not just me. Like I want my head of sales, I want my CEO, I want my COO, like dealing with all this stuff. Now take this, and then here we have a conversation about it. We talk about it. What can we do better as a company? Where are we fucking up? Who is fucking up? And how can we get that person to stop fucking up? That's essentially what I think leadership meetings are. I think leadership meetings should in some ways be kind of confrontational. You should be calling people out. You should be directly addressing issues in order to better the company and to improve. So that is usually, a big thing that is done, leadership meetings on a daily basis. Next, we move on to team management. So now that we've discussed like the leadership stuff, then we move into like the team shit basically. So a lot of the doing the work, for a larger team, that falls on like the copywriter, the media buyer. So on team management, I'll be doing things like copy reviews. What ads do we have in the pipeline to test out over the next 2 weeks? Or we'll be looking at like ad audits, checking in with the media buyer, seeing their decision making, critiquing their decision making, um, checking in with the videographer to see like, all right, where are we at in terms of timelines on launches? Do we have all the marketing assets ready? What needs to be worked on? All that good stuff. So yeah, team management, I like to meet with my team daily in most cases. It doesn't have to be like some super long meeting. I think a lot of these, I'm pretty, picky about my time and how it's spent. I'd like to make sure everything's done as efficiently as possible. These don't need to be like hour-long meetings. This can be a 15-minute meeting. This could be, 30 minutes or so. And a lot of times if I'm doing like training, for example, I think team management meetings and training meetings, those are kind of two distinct things. A daily management meeting is more so like a check-in, where are we at with this? Whereas a training, like for example, copy reviews, I might block off an hour in my day, like twice a week or so, to QC my junior copywriters' ads, give a full training, maybe do a presentation, something I'm working on to improve. Those are kind of two distinct things. So I would set two different meetings for that. And lastly, skill building. So, I think you always need to be building your skills. You always need to be improving, trying to get better at what you do, sharpening the sword. For me, for example, like getting better at writing ads, getting better at writing VSLs, getting better at leadership. I'm also learning about a lot of various topics right now. Like I'm learning a lot about private equity at the moment. I'm learning a lot about crypto at the moment. Like you need to be in a constant state of just improving, because I think that business is the single most competitive game in the entire world. I used to be an athlete. Like athletes are always trying to up their game. They're trying to improve. They're trying to get faster, stronger, better at their sport. They're trying to get in better shape. Business is the same way. You have to be skill stacking all the time as a marketer. Like once you learn copy, then you have to learn media buying. You have to build decent funnels. You need to understand positioning. Then you need to learn how to do all this and delegate it. You need to become a good leader. You need to become a good recruiter. These are all just kind of never-ending skill sets you need to build. So if you stop like learning, if you stop learning new skills, if you just become a stagnant human being who like doesn't improve and get better, your business is going to stagnate because of that. And that's bad. We don't want that to happen. So I try to build in time on a daily basis. Maybe this is going through courses. Maybe this is reading books. Maybe this is working one-on-one with my coaches, people who I hire to help me improve the things I'm working on. But that is a non-negotiable for me. I would say these are for the most part non-negotiables. Like this is, I don't write ads every single day, but I try to do it. I do take weekends off sometimes. I don't always meet with the leadership team and the team every single day, but for a company at scale, I think that's important. So that's kind of how I structure my day at a high level. I'm pretty OCD about my schedule, but I've tested a million different things. And when I stick to this, that is when my business has made the most money. So hence, I would like to continue doing this day to day. Now, I will say a lot of times this goes totally haywire. Like a lot of times the day just gets out of hand. Something comes in, there's a fire that comes up. So the earlier you can wake up and just bang all of this out so that you can hedge against the fact that your day might go crazy, because, if you've never ran a company at scale before, you may not know this, but like things go wrong every single fucking day. It's part of the game. So yeah, I would say wake up early, bang this out as fast as humanly possible without sacrificing quality, and then make sure you're good to go from there. So hopefully this is helpful. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. If you have any questions, if there's other videos you would like to see, definitely drop me a comment. I'm always trying to think of new ideas, ways to be helpful for my audience here. So thanks for watching. I'll see you on the next one.